and we'll begin. So welcome, we're here to review, and if any of you are new or you're experienced, we're going to go over the ELPA 21 summative and the ELPA assessments coming up starting January 27th. So we want to just talk a little bit about where do we go to get this and to get started. Those of you that are experienced, this is just a review. Anyone in here new, we're just going to go through kind of each of the parts, and then we can ask some questions whenever you need to. You can just come off. And Julie and I will take turns kind of talking through it. So I'm just going to talk about the portal, and there's a link here. In that portal up at the top, there's the home users resources. You will all log in as test administrators. And then when you get to test administrators, you'll be able to see the before TIED and the practice administration. You'll be able to see administering the test with the operational tests. And then you will see reporting. The DEI is for any Braille that you may need to access. And then the secure inbox is where the ISR, the individual student reports, are housed and where you can find those later. So we're going to go through each of those sections.
And Anne,
yes.
Do you want to share that if we send a test or something to the districts, that's where we send it through, is the ISR? I mean, the secure inbox?
You bet. So Julie just told you, if you get an ISR from us, this is where it will be. Okay. When you get things, they'll be in that secure box too. All right. Before testing, now we have some links here that take you to the resources tab of the ELPA 21 Cambium portal, and it will help you for test administration, any accessibility and accommodations that you may want to find out about. In addition, we also use the NSCAS accessibility and accommodations manual that has all the linguistic features and tools that you can use. You can use that for all the NSCAS, and ELPA 21 and the ELPA are part of NSCAS, okay? You want to make sure that you've worked with your technology person to make sure that your secure browser is updated and you have the secure browser on all the student devices.
You guys could have been doing something else, but I appreciate it.
And then you'll want to make sure that you have practice tests for the students. The reason for the practice is to help students become more familiar with the test platform. It also is a good opportunity for them to practice their language. And in kindergarten, there are lots of practice assessments, you know, for a longer version and a short: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So I wanted just to show you, those are all the practice assessments for the kindergarten. There are also practice assessments for the ALT, and that's good for, I think, the TA as well as the student to become familiar with the process. So if you're interested in some of these documents, they are linked there. And Julie, we can put in the link to this presentation if anyone has arrived after we've started. So maybe Julie will put that back in for you. There we go. Now, I want you to know this year it's shortened. We were kind of excited about that. They wanted to shorten the length of the test, but they're still doing all of the tasks that they need to be able to do. So this is the number of student tasks and questions for those tasks in each of the domains for each grade band. So you can kind of see what that number is for your grade band. And then the ELPA 21 gives recommendations for the time of the entire 4 domains or each domain about for each grade band. So it is a recommendation that we don't do all 4 at the same time. You really do want your students to do their very best. And so if you can schedule and plan, sometimes 2 domains at a time is fine, but sometimes it's nice to kind of break it up. But that's each district's, that's your own decision on what you would like to do for that. All right. Before testing, this just tells you the number of students you could have per TA. So it's a recommendation, but you really don't want to go over, especially, you know, to do the best for the students. So kindergarten, they recommend 1 or 2 TAs to 1 to 5 students. And then as you get older, the grades 9, 12, one TA for up to 20 students is appropriate. It's fine for the older students. There is a student technology checklist. This is really good for the younger students just to make sure they have some of those skills. Again, going back to the practice helps them use those skills and interact with highlighting feature if they want to, zoom to make the text larger if they would like to, and then to make it smaller. There are all these tools and features, and so you really want your students to be aware of them and be comfortable using them, and also the teachers, the TAs to know about them. Julie, do you want to talk about test security?
Sure, I had to find my mute button. So the test items are secure, so please don't discuss or duplicate any parts of the test. I know that Ann and I spend a lot of time working with ELPA, looking at test items, and it's really hard to create test items. So I know that, you know, if you can keep them secure, it's very much appreciated. Students can take notes using their digital notepad or a blank scratch piece of paper, but you have to remember, just like in NSCAS, you have to collect that scratch paper that they've used. And then the test tickets that you have printed out should be kept in a secure location, and then they should go back to the test coordinator at the end of the testing day. And then, of course, just like in NSCAS, cover any word walls or any other posted materials that would help during the test, and that make sure that students have all non-approved electronic devices turned off and secured away from them. And then, unfortunately, any test irregularities must be reported to NDE. And so Ann and I do go out and we observe testing, and I can tell you that across the state, people have done a great job of following all these secure items that we've asked for. And you know, they're very similar to the NSCAS ones, so nothing new here.
Okay, so there are some items that you'll need before testing, so you just want to be prepared. Here's the list that kind of gives you some help. And then there's a link here to the manual, and the TA script begins on page 25. So you want to help whoever's doing the test administration to become very familiar with that. And as Julie said, when we go out and observe, that's one of the things that we have to observe if that script has been followed, because they do need to make sure that we follow all protocols to make sure it's a very sound and good test. Okay, so creating rosters and printing test tickets in Tide. Right here, you'll have the preparing for test, and you have the option to create rosters if you would like to group your students, or you may upload rosters using a download template. NDE will download all of your students. They're working on that today and overnight tomorrow. I think by the 10th, you should go in and be able to check if your rosters in Tide are accurate. If for any reason there's something that's not been accurate, I mean, we've been hopeful that you've been checking your rosters with the advisor, but you can always go in to the data cleanup, and you can clean up like a reason not tested code if a student moved or if there were some other things that you have to clean up. And then during the test, as you're administering the test, this is where you'll print the tickets from the student list or any rosters, and you can do those tickets in any configuration that you would like. So here's where you print test tickets. Also, as the test is going on, you can monitor your test progress. Julie and I like to do this just to see how are we doing as a state. If we get down to the last couple of weeks of our testing window and we get in and we notice that some districts haven't even begun, we start reaching out because we really need to have 100% participation in the ELPA. And that's very important, but that helps us monitor where we are. Are there any questions about printing test tickets? Is there anybody unfamiliar with this process? If so, we can come off, but it kind of takes you through, and I'm just showing you the slideshow. So you go to administering the test, print test tickets, and then you can print from the student list. So this just gives you an example of the district and a school that's a demo, the English learner, and you can do the alt English learner. Someone had asked earlier, how do I ensure that my alt student gets the alt assessment? When you go to Tide, there's a place where it says alt ELPA assessment. You have to make sure that says yes if that student is supposed to be taking the alt.
And there is a question. It
Yes.
says, what do we do with their scratch paper? Dispose?
Yes, you just you tear it up, you shred it. And that's a good question too, because when you use, I did this all the time. I practiced with my students and we used graphic organizers and we wrote notes and we did all of those kinds of pre-tests. When I gave them the scratch paper for the official test, it was a blank piece of paper. However, they remembered the graphic organizers we had used and they could, recreate their own. So that's another thing. And especially for speaking, I always told the students, I can't give a talk without some notes. I would feel kind of embarrassed if I didn't know what I was going to say ahead of time. So I encourage them, have your paper beside you, write down your key thoughts for the question, use those as you do your speaking or your writing, and then we would collect them at the end and shred them. Does that answer the question? Awesome. All right, this one is also the printing test. So here you would see how many results you have, and then it takes you through. Number 2 just kind of shows you all test tickets, and then you've got your list. And now you can do this configuration any way you would like. You could print it so that you've got this size. You could make it smaller. You can get more to a page. 10 per page is the default, but you could make it whatever you need to. So if you have any questions about printing tickets, let us know. Resolving some common issues. Julie, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, this is something that we see a lot, that if a district uses a temporary IDs to administer to the screener, then those temporary IDs must be edited to the student's permanent ID after you get their permanent ID and put into the SSID prior to summative testing. So in other words, in order to be able to do the ELPA 21 summative testing, they have to be attached to a permanent SSID. And then in the student's Tide profile, that we ran into this last year too, the English learner status has to be marked yes in order for them to be able to do the summative testing. And then the paper filled test should be marked no, and the alternate ELP test is marked no if they're doing the ELPA 21. So the ELPA 21 summative and the screener should only be administered to English learners in Nebraska public schools. So ELPA supports public schools. It does not support non-public schools.
Okay, now we'll move to the summative and getting ready to test. So you'll open your Nebraska portal, and at the top screen, you'll see users. That's what we showed at the beginning. And you'll go to the operational test administration. Then you will be able to start a test session. Now, most districts group grade bands. However, some districts are smaller. You can run multiple grade bands. That's fine. You would just have to select whichever, if you wanted to do kindergarten, first grade, second, third, and you wanted them all to do their listening, then you would mark all of those and then start the session. And I had to learn this the hard way at the very beginning. I get everything ready. I was all excited. Then I would go to get the students. I had it all set up. I'd come back. It took a little bit longer than I thought. It logs out after 15 minutes. So my suggestion is get everybody ready, get everybody settled. Then when they're all there, you can go ahead and start the session. And then the session ID appears at the top of the screen.
Having the secondary teachers do curriculum work.
Okay, we'll see.
Okay.
Perfect. So what we'll go ahead and do is you can see that we would write it up on the screen for the students. So we would have it up so they could know what their session ID was. And then
I was going to share too that last year I was in a district and they did do multiple grade levels at one time, and it worked pretty well with them.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome to do that. So just depending on what your system is. So this is just kind of the familiar. Remember, the students have to type in their first name, their student ID. That's why they have their printed tickets, so that they get those right. That's what you want to do as a test administrator. Double check that they get all of their information in there accurately. And then you on your end will come in and approve. You'll approve. You can approve one student at a time, or you can approve all students, and you'll be able to see all of that. Those of you that are new to this, it's pretty user friendly. All right, monitoring the student progress. So from your screen, you'll be able to see which students are in, where they are, like how many numbers they've answered. It takes a couple minutes. Sometimes it uploads a little bit later, but you'll be able to see where they are. You can always pause, and that will pause the student's test, and sometimes it kicks them out and they have to come back in and log in again, but it should save the work that they've already completed. Students, sometimes if they have to go to the restroom and you want them just to, get up and go, there's a certain amount of time that they can go without it kicking them off. But if it's going to be longer, you might want to pause the test so you don't lose anything. And if anybody has any suggestions of experiences of what you've had, or any good examples, please come off mute and share with us. That would be fine.
Anne and I have to test these systems out before it is released to you guys. And so this is one area that we're always testing, and it's kind of neat. You can see the progress of the student as they're going.
When they're ready to end the test, the session is over, you click stop right up there, and it will automatically pause any, in progress tests, and it will log out. Once it's been stopped, it can't be resumed. The students will have to continue testing by you starting another session for them. And that's fine. You can do that. Students' records and information will not be kicked in unless they click submit their test. And then at the end, when they submit, this is where one thing that we see as we go out and monitor some of these assessments, please have your TAs always check the student's last screen, go back review if they need to, but the TAs are supposed to double check that the student has completed everything before they hit submit. And that was one of the things that I know as the kids are older and sometimes they just are real quick. That's a huge thing to emphasize with your students. Students, you may not submit until the TA has checked your last page. So that would be something to emphasize with them. Are there any questions now up through the before testing and the during testing? Okay, after testing. Now, when the tests are done, or during monitoring test progress, remember I told you we can go in and see where you are on your progress. This is why it's so important to check the students that you have, and you can enter the reason not tested code the day the test opens all the way through, I think it's March 28th. It gives you a little bit of time after the test window closes. So you may have had a student that just moved during the testing window, and we'll talk about some of those reasons not tested code, and you were never able to get them. Many districts, the minute the testing window opens, they're ready to go. They're testing their students. They're getting them ready. Some districts want to wait, and they do it a little bit later towards the end. It doesn't matter. You decide when you're going to do it. Just give yourself enough time. We think about weather delays, or we think about students that are ill, or we think about other things that come up. And I remember Fremont, a number of years back, there was a flood that happened and your school had to close down. And I think luckily most of your students had gotten the testing done before that happened in March. So you never know what could bring, what could happen, but you do want to try and do your very best to get 100% of all your English learners tested. And you can see how that is. You can manage that. Larger districts, this is a very valuable tool. even the smaller districts. It may be, oh, there was somebody I didn't even remember, and now it brought that up. So please double check. This again is kind of looking at your progress, and you can see students who have not completed any opportunity. That's what Julie and I will look at. If a student has completed one domain but not three, we at least know you're aware of it and you're working on them. We start to pull up students who have not completed any domains, and then we're on the phone or we're emailing you, hey, do you know you've got a couple of kiddos that need to be tested? And many times they'll rip up, yep, we're waiting, we're going to do it on X day. And we're like, well, don't wait until the very end, but do your best. So I don't know if
I
there's
was
any questions
observing
on.
a district last year, and we had the date all set and everything, and they were waiting until a little bit later. Well, they qualified for state basketball. So that took out some days right there. So I think what Ann's sharing is just, good planning in case something like that might happen.
This is just a picture of a roster generated with the number of students, and so you can create those rosters if you would like to in Tide. Some districts don't worry about it. They just do it by the school. And here are the reason not tested codes that are things that may come up. The ones that are in red are the ones that you would get a ding for. So the ones that are in black, then that doesn't count against you. Remember, our hope is 100% participation. But I will tell you, the last couple of years, it's been more like 95, 96% participation. I mean, if you get 100% in your district participation, we're like, that's awesome. Do we notify them when we think we are all finished? Nope, you don't need to notify us when you're all finished, but we can check, and please let us know if you have any questions during the testing or you need any support. But no, when you're done, you're done. You can just go in and double check and make sure you've got it all and get it all cleaned up. Again, these are just the codes. Non-public students do not take the ELPA. So if you've got a non-public student that's listed, also a clarification, students that are 50% or less. So a student who is 51% or more, your student, they need to take the test. That's just like the NSCIS rule. And that doesn't mean like 50% or less is not, oh, they came in November. So they're not a full, they've not been here 100% of the time. No, it's not even a student who has a shortened day. It's a student that may be in a private school, but they come to you for a period to receive special education, or a student that may be homeschooled, but they come to the high school for 2 classes of something that they're working on towards, further education. The students that are enrolled with you 51% more or of the time, no matter what their schedule looks like, those are the students you test. 50 or below, you don't. Does any having questions of that? Okay. And then where you go to the after testing and data cleanup. It comes up reason not tested. It's not available now, but it will be available starting January 27th when the testing window opens. And this is where you put the information for the students that have not tested. Lori asked a question. Student new to the U.S. moves into the district during the testing window. Yes, the very first thing we must do is understand if that student qualifies as an English learner. We won't give a summative to a student who doesn't qualify as an English learner. So you give them the home language survey. They have a language other than English on that survey. You give them the screener. If they qualify with the screener, then you give them the summative. And we understand timing. We just ask that you do your very best in whatever works best for you. So if a student moves in January 27th, you give them the screener. You have plenty of time to give them the summative if they qualify. If a student moves in March 13th and you give them the screener and you don't have time March 14th we understand that, So you do your very best with what you can do. but good question. All right, accessing the scores. This is where Julie was talking about that secure file center, but you go to that bottom where it says reporting, and in the reporting system, you'll be able to pull up, you can pull up multiple years. Right now, we've been going back to the 23-24 school year when students move, and we can find their last year's report. These reports will be given to us sometime in May. Usually it's very early in May, which is really helpful. And then you're able to see how your students do. This dashboard kind of gives you the overall picture of your district. Then you can get in and you can look through grade level and then school level as well. So this shows you when you go to the dashboard, and this tells you the summative test and how many tests were taken, the grades that were given, and therefore. So you can kind of see the red is the emerging, yellow is progressing, green is proficient. And then you can drill down and you can see the grade, the student count, the average score, and if you want to look at the AQuest looks at the overall scale score, and that's where we're looking to see if a student made growth. In emerging, we have 2 levels, a low and a high emerging. In progressing, we have a low, medium, and high. Those scale scores kind of give you the range for what that student may have done in that grade level. So those are things that you can look at and dig a little deeper. Do you have any questions for us about the ELPA 21 summative? And we're going to talk a little bit more about the alt, but we know that's a smaller population. So as you're preparing, how are you feeling?
And I have a lot of different roles, so I'm trying to separate this from another one. But did I read somewhere that if a student were to be assessed as proficient in one domain, do they still have to take that domain in the next years until all 4
Yes.
domains are passed?
Yes, they need to meet proficient in all 4 domains in the same year. We have had conversation about this specifically at the high school. ELPA 21 is working on it, but right now they say there's some conflicts and some difficulties in the scoring because every year it's a little bit different. So the student must currently, this is the way it is, they have to score proficient in all 4 domains in the same year. So if they met proficiency in listening last year, but they had 3s in the other 3 domains, they take all 4 domains again this year. And we encourage them to do their very best in all 4 domains. They've already demonstrated they can do it in listening. Let's do it again. And now let's see how we can do. So proficient is 4s and 5s. It can be all 4s. It can be a combination of 4s and 5s. But proficient is all 4s and or 4s and 5s. And
In
all
the
5.
same year. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? How many of you have alt students this year? A couple? See a couple hands? Okay. So the alt assessment, I highly encourage doing those practice assessments with the students and the TAs. We've always encouraged 2 TAs for the alt per student. They have to do some hand scoring on during the time. So there is a training. There are resources within the resources on our Cambium website. And there are also the training modules that are available through ELPA 21. I think I've got it. The district, if you go here and you log in, oh, maybe it didn't come up. I thought I had it down here. The directions to accessing the training modules. If you click on these directions, it tells you exactly the website to go to. The district verification code is actually just ELPA 21, no spaces and all lowercase. And you can get in and you can go through the training modules that will help you understand more how each of the assessments looks and is running. But for the alt, basically you want to make sure that you've looked ahead of time at the student's IEP to make sure that you've put in all the allowable accommodations that you can. And there are lots that can be used with the ALT because this population of students has many various needs and various accommodations. So anything that's in the IEP that you use on a regular basis in the classroom basically can be done for the ALT ELPA. I don't know if there's any questions about the ALT that are more specific. We have gone out and observed the ALT, and it's really fun to watch, and it's neat to see what the students can do and how they can show you what they do know. We have had students meet proficiency through the ALT. I think last year we had 9 students meet proficiency. And remember, this is a very small population. I think we had maybe over 119 students take the ALT ELPA last year, and many of them, it was their first year taking it. And so they don't count in your AQuest accountability until we've got 2 years of data. So that's something for you to see. Hopefully we can see some growth and see some things happening.
I have a question for you. If in their IEP they are nonverbal, or if they only use a communication device with very limited language, we can send you an email to have them exempt from the speaking domain, correct?
Correct. The domain exemptions are for those domains the student cannot access. It's not just you don't think they'll do very well. And there are accommodations that can be done too. So the use of a device, a communication device, could be an allowable accommodation on the ALT if you wanted to see what they could respond.
I have a question. So, students who qualify for the NSCUS alt, you know how the state only has like less than 1% or less. It's very strict with like the criteria for that. We have some students who have a IQ score below 70. However, their adaptive skills are higher, so they technically qualify ID, but they don't qualify for the alt NSCUS. Would those students be a good, candidate for the alt ELPA, even though they don't have that alt NSCUS? Does that make sense?
Yes, and I would like to show you kind of a checklist. There's a flow chart and a checklist. It's easiest to identify when the student already qualifies for the NSCAS alt. Then that is a very easy determination for your EL students. We are also under the 1%. So you could look at the total of EL students, but it's a statewide. So Sharon Heater really works a lot with our alt population. I would encourage you to go through this participation checklist and just answer the questions yes or no and kind of write some notes. And that would help you determine because lots of times we have English learners in K1, 2, so they're not even considered for the NSCAS alt yet until they're 3rd grade. So you may want to say, okay, they're not in the NSCAS alt yet because they're kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, but they have some of these criteria that would help them be determined as an alt for the ELPA. But I would be very cautious if they don't qualify for the alt NSCAS, they probably won't qualify for the alt ELPA. And that's where you could look at the accommodations on the ELPA 21, the accessibility. You can do those linguistic supports. You can do some of those kinds of things too, if that helps.
That helps. Thank you.
We have a very small population, and I know there's nothing we can really do about it, but our students arrived mid-year, so it was just difficult to watch them struggle to take the ELPA. Couldn't read at the time, and then they turned around 2 weeks later and sat through NSCAS testing as well. And I felt badly for them, as newcomers. I told them, I know this will be challenging for you and you'll get there, but it was just a hard way for them to be introduced to American education the first month they were here.
Yeah, I totally understand. The good thing is, hopefully this year, they're going to feel so much more confident and they're going to see their growth. And that's what I always talk about. Language acquisition is really a lot of growth, and sometimes it's very quick. Sometimes it's a little bit slower, but there is growth. And when they can see
Absolutely.
that, that helps.
It just was hard to watch this little junior high girl. She would hide behind her bangs because she knew
Oh.
she couldn't talk or speak yet. You know, we keep using the word yet, and it created a lot of empathy. And like I said, then they had to turn around and take the NSCAS when we had pretty good indication to the ELPA that they weren't there yet.
Right, right. Totally understand.
Yeah.
Well, this is basically all we had for you as a refresher, just to kind of go through. But please reach out. Julie and I are available to answer questions, to help problem solve anything that you might need. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but then I'll just stay on if anybody has anything that they